When you think about esports, you may associate them with shooters, MOBAs, real-time strategies, and even fighting games. But you might not associate esports with RPGs. Role-playing games or RPGs are a genre that is rather difficult to define. Just take a look at other genres. A shooter is a game where the act of shooting is used to accomplish a specific goal, like capturing a point of interest or being the last survivor at the end of the round. But what exactly are RPGs? If you go by the standard definition, RPGs are games where you assume the role of a character in a fictional setting. But that definition is rather vague and can be applied to almost any genre. Also, what really counts as an RPG? Final Fantasy is a classic example. This series has set many conventions for the genre. But on the other end, Fallout, a game that you might assume that is a shooter, it's actually an RPG. Instead of encapsulating RPGs by one definition, it is better to define the genre by their mechanics. Leveling up, skill trees, exploration, interface navigation. These are elements that are associated with RPGs but are not exclusive to that genre. But the aspect that helps differentiate RPGs the most is their combat system. Inspired by Dungeons & Dragons and other tabletop games, turn-based combat has been a staple of many RPGs. From the 5 best-selling RPGs franchises in the world, 4 of them have games with turn-based combat. Over the years, there's been a debate of whether turn-based combat is actually fun or antiquated. It's hard to explain what is so appealing about choosing options from a menu and letting the game throw some random numbers at the player. But that's just a superficial view on turn-based combat. If we look at the big picture, turn-based combat is just as complex as any other game system. As a player, your job is to manage resources and plan which options to use. You have to focus both on what is happening on the current turn and what's going to happen in the future turns. The games are going to throw curveballs at you, and they are almost unpredictable. As a player, you have to adapt to these situations and create new strategies on the fly. This is what turn-based combat is about. However, this perspective is often ignored by gamers, and a common argument is that most of these combat systems rely on just pressing the A button and running repetitive battles when you're having a hard time. And I cannot blame gamers for thinking this way. Many RPGs fail to push the boundaries of their system. But when an RPG exists in turn-based combat, you end up with a system that rewards experimentation, where each battle feels different, and a system where the player must learn what are the best strategies to deal with the challenges provided by the game. However, the explanation I have given so far applies only when the player faces the computer. What if the player faces another human being? The act of strategizing becomes more complex as there is the human variable affecting your decisions. And the fact that there is turn-based, it doesn't mean that it's not as enjoyable as other systems, as it provides a room for planning. At the end of the day, chess remains one of the most played games in the world, despite the fact that it's a turn-based game. But what about a game of chess with over 1,000 pieces with unique traits? Then we will get one of the most complex competitive games. And this is a game that you might be familiar with, but not in this context, as it is not only the best-selling RPG franchise in the world, but it is also the highest grossing media worldwide. Pokémon. In this video, I will talk about the competitive scene for the mainline Pokémon games, going over the design philosophy behind these games, the community backing up the scene, and explain why you should play this game competitively. Part 1. Design Philosophy. Now, if you're familiarized with other RPGs, you might think that I'm exaggerating. I mean, how can a game designed for kids be so complex? But the key is in understanding the design philosophy behind these games. Pokemon is a sandbox. Kinda. It is not a sandbox like Minecraft where the player can do pretty much anything they want. Instead, Pokemon give enough tools to the player so they can decide how to approach the game. These games started with a playable roster of over 100 characters, and that number has increased greatly over the years. Nowadays, we have over 1,000 Pokemons, and that number keeps increasing. The huge variety of characters allows the player to make different combinations for their team, and it makes experience different from player to player. Pokemon was not the first RPG with collectible monsters. That honor is given to the Megami Tensei franchise, which debuted in 1987, almost 10 years before Pokemon Red and Green released in Japan. However, Pokemon has a multiplayer system where players can trade and battle other players that own the game. The social aspect in Pokemon helps differentiate this franchise from other RPGs, because not only are these games full single-player campaign, but you can also use the characters that you collect in the adventure to fight other players. This gives incentive to keep coming back to the games to capture the most powerful creatures, create optimal strategies, and create perfect teams to beat your friends. However, later you will learn that there is much more complications in the act of team building, but we're not gonna go over that just yet. Just keep that in mind. What concerns us now is understanding how each creature is designed. One element that every Pokemon has in common is having an elemental typing, where each Pokemon can have either a unique type or a combination of two types. The type combination affects two things. The first one is your resistances and the same type attack bonus, also known as stab. Let's start with the resistances. As of the release of this video, there are 18 elemental types in the game, with each type having a unique interaction between each other. For example, most games start introducing the type resistance system to the player with the elemental triangle of grass, fire, and water, where fire is super effective against grass, grass is super effective against water, and water is super effective against fire. Depending on the type that you are hit against, there will be one of four responses. If a type is super effective against another one, the damage will be double. If a type is not so effective against another one, the damage will be half. However, not every type is only super effective or resist against another one. In some cases, the type can just hit for neutral damage, meaning that the damage amount is not affected by type resistance. But there's one more special interaction. Some types are immune against another one, meaning that they will receive no damage at all. Okay, so far so good. However, there's one more complication in the resistance system, and that is when we account for a Pokemon with two types. As I mentioned before, grass is hit super effective with a fire attack. However, if grass is accompanied by water, that means that now fire attacks do neutral damage. What I have covered so far are the basics of the typing system. Pokemon games expect you to have an understanding of these mechanics to finish the single-player campaigns. Their expectation is that you use super effective moves against creatures that are in front of you. And when you play against another player, that is a really good option as well. However, there is one mechanic that I haven't talked about yet: switching. At the beginning of each turn, you have one of 5 choices. You can either choose one of your 4 moves, or you can switch the current Pokemon in the field with one that is in your party. Switching is one of the most powerful tools at your disposal. If you see that your opponent is trying to hit one of your weaknesses, You can switch to a Pokemon that resists or is immune to that attack. This is one of the most common strategies that you're going to see in competitive, and it's what makes strategizing so much fun. There are a lot of variables that as a player you have to consider, and there are a lot of things that are going to be unpredictable. You have to adapt to these curveballs on the spot. Now let's talk about moves. In Pokemon, each Pokemon can only have up to 4 moves at a time. Now, let's consider the same type attack bonus or stat. This is a bonus of 1.5 times the base power to moves that share the same type as the user. This makes choosing attacks that are the same type as the Pokemon more appealing as they will increase your damage output. But you also have to consider that the Pokemon can learn moves from other typings, and you might want to add them to one of your 4 move slots to cover weaknesses. However, a Pokemon cannot do everything at once, and you have to make builds that fulfill a specific role. Now, when defining roles in Pokemon, we need to talk about another trait that is unique for each Pokemon, and that is their stats. In recent games, stats are divided into 6 categories: hit points or HP, attack, defense, special attack, special defense, and speed. HP is a stat that is really common in other games, usually defined as health points. This value shows you how much damage your Pokemon can take before being defeated. Attack determines how strong the Pokemon physical moves will be, and defense determines how much physical damage the Pokemon can take. However, you might already notice that there is also a special attack and special defense, and they work similarly to regular attack and defense, but with a huge difference. You see, moves are split into 2 categories: physical and special. Physical moves use attack and defense to calculate damage, while special moves use special attack and special defense. Lastly, we have speed, that determines which Pokemon acts first in a turn. Its stats are distributed for each Pokemon in what is known as base stats, which gives a range that determines how high the value of each stat will be. This might be a little confusing, but to keep it simple, base stat is used as a reference, while the real value of each stat is calculated based on that reference. There's more nuance to how this works, but I'll get to that later. What you want to know for now is how base stats shape roles in a team. A Pokemon with high speed and high offensive stat is known as an attacker or sweeper. This is going to be your main source of damage. On the other end, you might want to have a Pokemon that can take those strong hits. For that, you might want to look for one that has high HP and defense. These are going to be your walls. They can take hard-hitting moves and respond by spreading status effects on the opponent. Alright, that's another thing I haven't talked about yet. You see, there are not only offensive moves, there are also status moves that give special effects to either the user or the opponent. Some of these moves can range from giving status ailment to the opponent, buffing the user's stats, and even more. Believe me, there are a lot of status moves in the game, and you don't need to know all of them at once, but it's extremely important to understand how useful they can be. So far I have talked about mechanics that you may have already seen if you play any of the single player campaign, and unconsciously you might have built a team for the adventure that take these metrics in mind. By itself, most of these are really complex, but we have just covered the tip of the iceberg. These systems get even more complicated. Now, if so far you have struggled to keep up, don't worry. I'll do my best to simplify things from now on. But this next section will be content heavy. Now, it's time to see the many complexities of competitive Pokemon. Part 2. Every Pokemon is unique. Let's talk about another trait that is universal, and that is abilities. Abilities are passive skills that range from situational to role defining. Most Pokemon have a range from 1 to 3 abilities, but they can only have one active at a time. One of the interesting aspects of abilities is that a Pokemon can have multiple good abilities, and choosing which fits your team depends on what role you want to fill. For example, the Pokemon Gyarados have access to 2 incredible abilities, which are Intimidate and Moxie. The way Intimidate works is that for every time Gyarados enters the field, the opponent attack stat is going to be lowered by 1 stage unless they have a special ability or item that blocks the effect. This allows Gyarados to switch in easily against physical opponents, which gives Gyarados a more defensive advantage. However, the other ability, Moxie, works completely different. For each KO that Gyarados gets, their attack is going to increase 1 level. This creates a snowball effect that is really hard to stop without a proper physical wall. Despite being the same Pokemon, you can see how just changing one ability changes the game plan completely. But there are other ways where you can adapt Pokemons to your preferred playstyle. Before I went over stats, but I just scratched the surface. If you recall from my explanation, every Pokemon has a unique base stat spread that serves as a reference for the real value. However, there are 2 hidden values that are added to the total real value. These are IVs and EVs. IVs are values that range from 0 to 31 on each stat, and these are values that are randomly decided once a Pokemon is obtained. EVs, on the other hand, are points that the player can put to boost certain stats. The caveat being that the player only have 510 points to spread among all the stats. Each stat can only have a maximum of 255 points, and every 4 points means that you get 1 point added to the real value. Now, there is one more relevant aspect that affects stats, and that is nature. Similarly to IVs, this is a value that is randomly determined once a Pokemon is obtained. However, the way it works is that depending on which nature the Pokemon is, your stat will be affected in 1 or 2 ways. Either your stats do not get any multiplier, meaning that you got a neutral nature, or one of your stats is gonna get increased while another one is gonna get decreased. Okay, so far I have talked about numbers. Where is really the fun on this? Well, Pokemon is a game about information. The more you know about your opponent, the higher your chances of winning will be. Not only do you want to know which Pokemon moves and abilities your opponent has, but you also want to know their stats. Let's set up the stage. There are 2 Pokemon in the field, facing each other. Both have the same base speed stat. They both have a move that can easily defeat the opposing side. However, how do we proceed from here? Well, in the case that both Pokemon have the same speed value, then who acts first is decided from an invisible coin flip where the game randomly decides which side acts first. This is called a speed tie. However, what if one side decides to invest on speed and decides to go for a nature that increases speed? That means that the side who benefited from this boost will always act first. But what if the opposing side invested on defense, surviving that hit and responding with a more powerful move? Well, this is just one scenario, a really simple one, and the possibilities I'm bringing are just a few out of hundreds. There are so many variables to consider for each interaction, and it's overwhelming at first. But as you keep playing, you're going to start recognizing patterns and behaviors. And ultimately, what you're going to notice is every Pokemon is unique. One of the most common misunderstandings is that at high level play, there is no variety. Every team looks and plays the same. But that's not true, not in the slightest. So far, I have briefly covered moves, abilities, stats, and the way you can modify them. And most of the time, when you have two teams that might look the same, even the smallest changes can drastically alter how they play. Let's just take a look at two teams that were used for the 2024 World Championship, the most important tournament for the official competitive format. These are teams used by Sengyo Yeon and Luca Caribelli, who reached 4th and 1st place respectively. At first glance, these two teams might look the same as they share the same core of 6 Pokemon: Miraidon, Ogerpon, Whimsicott, Iron Hands, Urshifu, and Fire Giraffe. But once you analyze the team, you start to see how they diverge into two different playstyles. Let's talk about the Urshifu. You see, Urshifu actually have two forms, Single Strike and Rapid Strike. They both have the same base stats, however their typing and move pool are different, and more importantly, each form has a unique move with unique properties. Luca's team uses the Rapid Strike, while Yeon's team uses a Single Strike. Luca's Urshifu can hit multiple times using the signature move Surging Strikes, allowing it to break the Focus Sash, an item that lets the user survive if they are hit by a move that will take them out while they are at full health. On the other hand, Yeon's Urshifu, while being unable to hit multiple times, have access to Wicked Blow, which allows for greater immediate damage in most situations. They also have the move Sucker Punch, which is a slightly strong move that acts first as long as the opponent picks a damaging move. Luca's Urshifu also has a move with priority in Aqua Jet, but this move is weaker. And just comparing how both players build their Urshifu, we can see how different their playstyle is. And if you keep looking at both teams, you're going to notice more significant differences. And that's just the magic of competitive Pokemon. Player expression is almost unlimited. There are so many aspects of a Pokemon that you can modify that it's extremely rare to see two Pokemons being the same, even if they are from the same species. But going back to the argument that most teams feel the same, I believe this comes from the core values that the franchise have sold to many players throughout the years. In many games and other Pokemon related medias, we have seen the message of winning with your favorites. And for many players, it is hard to see that their favorites might not be as good as other options. I mean, there are over 1,000 Pokemons. It is safe to assume that every Pokemon is someone's favorite, but the reality is that there are team compositions that are better than others. In a game that is so inconsistent as Pokemon, with a lot of luck-based events happening each battle, consistency is value over anything else. But what if I told you that there's a place where you can use your favorite Pokemons in an equal field and they are just as good as you remember? Well, for that we need to take a look at how metas are developed in competitive Pokemon. Part 3. Creating a game for everyone. If you have any experience with fighting games, you might be familiarized with tier lists. This serves as ranking on how good or bad characters are. Usually, characters that are popular, have good tournament results, or have strong tools are placed on the top of the list. By using this metric, a meta is developed. In a way, you can see the development of a meta like a constant game of rock, paper, and scissors. If a good character appears, soon counters will show up. New discoveries will be made, and counters to the counters will appear. Exploring different options is a fundamental part of the fighting game experience, but is not exclusive to that genre. You can argue that this is seen in other competitive games regardless of the genre. Pokemon is a particular unique case when it comes to classifying each character. In a roster of over 1,000 characters, there is no way that each character was created equally. Some are given a lot of tools, some are not given enough tools, and some are not given tools at all. As mentioned before, there are Pokemon that are just better than others. If we put all of them to compete within just one shared space, the end result will be a big portion of the roster won't be used at all. As such, the meta in Pokemon are developed to account for the huge roster, giving every Pokemon an equal chance to succeed. Now, there has been a lot of metas that have been developed throughout the years, but there are two main ones. These are the official competitive format known as BGC and the community format Smogon. BGC is played using the doubles format and is the meta enforced by the Pokémon Company for official competition. On the other hand, Smogon is the meta developed by the community. While Smogon covers singles and doubles, their most popular format is singles. While BGC and Smogon operate within two different structures, both metas are played using the mechanics of the mainline Pokémon games. If you are a new player, you might be confused on which meta to play, so I'll briefly give an overview on both metas. Starting with BGC. This is the format played in most official competitions for the mainline games. Battles are done in the double format. Games are played only bringing 4 Pokémon from a total team of 6, and games are usually fast-paced. BGC develops the meta in a season format, where certain rules are enforced for a period of time. These rules decide which Pokémon are allowed to be used in tournaments. Official tournaments are played in console, and most of them are in person. They use a circuit format where players participate in smaller tournaments to collect points, and if they gather enough points, they can qualify for the World Championship, which is the biggest tournament of the season. On the other hand, we have Smogon. They are widely known for their usage system. The way this ranking works is that Pokémon are classified on how much they are used. If a Pokémon receives high usage in ladder and tournament, that Pokémon is considered a top tier or overused as it is known. There are multiple formats that separates the over 1,000 Pokémon into smaller rosters to give place for each Pokémon to compete against each other in a similar power level. In contrast to BGC, most single metas in Smogons are played in 6v6 games, and the regulation on what is allowed is decided by the community and a council that supervises the meta. In my opinion, every player should try both BGC and Smogon at least once to see for themselves which suits better their goals and playstyle. However, there are a few shortcomings that you should know about regarding competitive Pokemon. Part 4. Barrier of Entry. In 2023, during the Pokemon World Championship, many players were disqualified for hacking Pokemon into their game. Now, hacking is a serious problem in many competitive games, as it gives an unfair advantage. However, hacking in the context of Pokemon is a delicate topic, as many players do not hack maliciously, but instead as a way to fully optimize their builds. Now, many of the hack Pokemons are made in a way that their stats, move, and abilities matches those of legit Pokemons. Most of the time, these hacks are not meant to create overpowered creatures, but instead just replicate a build that you could technically get in the game if you put the time in. So the question now is, if you can actually get these builds playing the game itself, what is the need of hacking in the first place? Well, the problem is that the time that it takes to make these builds, it's way too much. It takes hours to create the perfect team, and it's not optimal to spend that much time creating that team when you can spend that time practicing. Just to give an idea on how long it takes to create a competent team, the user I am a Blissey has a series of videos going over the process of creating a competitive team, and a team made for the Pokemon World Championship 2024 took 6 hours and 30 minutes. Now, let's consider that this was just one team made for the tournament. But what about making multiple teams during the development of a season? You might have to spend hours upon hours getting the proper tools to create an optimal team, just so that when you are done creating it and you finally get to play it, you realize that the team was not that good in the first place, and you may have to start all over again with a new build. It is extremely discouraging, and it creates a huge barrier of entry for many players. But that's not even the worst part about it. You see, Pokemon is a pay-to-win game. The 2024 World Championship was played in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, and it had a rule set where you could use one Pokemon for a group of powerful legendary Pokemon known as Restricted. Among those, you can find the Pokemon Calyrex. By itself, Calyrex is one of the weakest Pokemon of all times, having a few not that good tools. However, there's a special interaction in the game where Calyrex can fuse with any of two Pokemon. These are Spectre and Leicester, giving you access to the two most powerful restricted Pokemon in the format, Calyrex Ice Rider and Calyrex Shadow Rider. Now, how do you get any of these Pokemon? Well, you need to catch a Calyrex in either a Spectre or Leicester. Both Spectre and Leicester are available in Scarlet and Violet, but only in the DLC, meaning that to get any of these two Pokemon, you need to spend $60 on the base game and $35 on the DLC. However, Calyrex is not available in Scarlet and Violet. The only way you can have a Calyrex in those games is by transferring it from either Pokemon Sword or Pokemon Shield. But that's not all. Calyrex do not show up in the base game of Sword and Shield. Calyrex is locked behind the DLC, meaning that you need to buy either Sword or Shield for $60 and another $30 for the DLC. Now, to be fair, Spectre and Leicester can also be obtained in the DLC for Sword and Shield, meaning that technically we do not need the DLC for Scarlet and Violet, but even with that, we need one copy of either Scarlet or Violet, one copy of either Sword or Shield, and the DLC for Sword or Shield. The total amount is $150. Getting Calyrex costs $150. This is just ridiculous. Having to spend both money and a huge amount of time to get an optimal team is not good for a competitive game. I don't want to act as devil advocate either, but at least with other games, when you buy a DLC or a character pass, you know that that character is available to you and it will be the same at all times unless a patch note releases. However, in Pokemon, you need to do a lot of side quests and grinding to obtain that Pokemon behind the DLC and train it properly. This makes the barrier of entry for competitive play just ridiculous, and it makes for a strong case in favor of the hackers. Now, it's undeniable that hacking is a problem. Many players are spending that time and money to get their optimal teams, and hackers are avoiding it. So, if a conclusion can be drawn from this situation is that the system is flawed. While building a competitive team is easier than ever, there are still so many problems that are not addressed yet, and the competition has become more about how you get those Pokemon instead of focusing on your skills while playing the game. The official games need an overhaul on their system that provides a more convenient and faster way of building teams, at least for the PvP mode. Whether that's going to be done, it is extremely unlikely, but hope is not lost. While playing in console is slow and tedious, there's a way to play competitive Pokemon that is both accessible and skips the annoying grinding and abusive practices. Part 5. The best way of playing Pokemon. With the popularity of Pokemon, finding alternatives to play competitively has always been a point of interest. Back in 2001, there was a fan project known as Porygon Big Show, which is considered the first Pokemon battle simulator. The purpose of this site was to replicate the mechanics and system of Generation 1 Pokemon into a website where everyone can create a team in a short amount of time and play against other players online. This has been the foundation for many of the big breakthroughs in the competitive scene, as later we will get other simulators with improved UI, compatibility with future generations, and so much more. Later, we will get Net Battle in 2004, Shorty Battle in 2007, Pokémon Online in 2010, and the current most popular battle simulator, Pokémon Showdown. Showdown is without a doubt the best way to play competitive Pokémon. There are so many quality of life features that will get you ready to play in just a few minutes. The Team Builder is an extremely powerful tool that gives you access to every Pokémon in the game with every move and ability available to them. You can modify these Pokémon at your will, and it just takes a few seconds to modify each value. It is intuitive, and it gives you a lot of tools and information to make your life easier when building teams. Not only that, but if your team building skills are not that advanced, it is really easy to get sample teams and start playing ladder. The best aspect of Showdown is how fast it is. Even during battles, animations are minimalistic and you can skip them to get right to the planning. You can focus on the most essential part of competitive play, and loading a new game just takes a few seconds. Your time is not going to be wasted. It is a huge difference in speed compared to playing in console. Another great aspect of Showdown is how accessible it is. The only thing you need to play it is a browser, and the best part about it is that this is a really light game, meaning that you can run this game in pretty much any device. You can play it from your PC, on your phone, even on your fridge. And all of this is for free. No additional payments, no pay-to-win mechanics. You have access to everything from the start. Now, if you recall from before, Smogon is the meta developed by the community, and it is mainly developed by the player base in Showdown. The ladder and tournaments play in Showdown is used to make the respective tier shifts. Showdown offers a ladder system with matchmaking for the majority of Smogon formats. Overuse is the main format for competitive singles, but there are many other formats that you can play, and there's even support for BGC formats inside Showdown, allowing you to practice and try out teams before building them in console. Showdown also has a huge social component attached to it. There are chats that you can join to talk with other players, join tournaments, and have access to resources for specific formats. Furthermore, if you decide to join the Smogon community, you can play in special tournaments held in the forums. They even have their own special circuits that resembles the official World Championships. And that's not all. You can also play older generations, and there are active communities giving support to these formats. The community keeping these generations alive make new discoveries each day, and there are special tournaments exclusive to these older generations. But wait, there is more. There's a random battle mode where your entire team is randomly decided, so you don't even have to build your own team to play. So even if you're not that interested in competing in tournaments, you can still experience most of the complexity of competitive Pokemon in an environment with an even lower barrier of entry. This mode is perfect to kill time, as you can just take out your phone and do some random battles, and due to the nature of the format, the stakes are rather low, making for a perfect activity to stimulate your brain. I'm sorry, I'm going a little bit overboard with this, but Showdown is probably the best time you're going to have with competitive Pokemon. I have seen this joke about a sequel to chess, 4D chess or chess with multiverse time travel. The idea is that chess is such a well-known game, we all know the rules, but what if it was this super complex game to an absurd degree? Well, Pokemon is just that. It's chess with over 1,000 pieces. As a franchise, Pokemon is one that is hold dear to a lot of people's heart. And it was an important part of many people's childhood. It is true, that a huge part of this love to the series comes from nostalgia, but I believe that these games are so unique and fascinating. And yeah, the quality standard for this game has dropped hugely, especially during the Switch era. But I keep coming back to these games. And as I keep getting older, I wonder, why do I keep coming back to these games? There are many things about these games that make me mad. There are many abusive practices, and sometimes it feels like the Pokemon Company is conspiring against their players. But the systems are so complex and there are so many variables that at the end of the day, each time I come back to these games, I discover new things. There's always something new to learn, something new to try out. As a new game keeps coming out, new options become available. I keep coming back to the games because I have fun playing them competitively. I'm not the best player. I haven't won any tournaments. I haven't even come close to that. But I still have fun playing these games. And I wish that more people see these games the way I do. In this video, I have only covered the surface when it comes to competitive Pokemon. There's still a lot I haven't talked about yet, but I'll leave that for another time. For now, my goal is to invite you to try competitive Pokemon. Do your own research about things that caught your interest. Make your own teams, strategies, meet new people, and most importantly, have fun. Thanks a lot for watching the video. This is my biggest video up to this date. I'm glad you made it this far. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and a comment. It helps the channel a lot and it will motivate me to keep making videos. Also, if you enjoy my content, please subscribe. There will be more content like this in the future. You can also follow me on my social media. I have a Twitter where I post updates about new videos and other projects. So if you want to stay up to date with information about the channel, please follow me there. I'm also an aspiring game developer, so if you want to try any of my games, you can check my itch.io page. With that said, thanks once again for your support, and until next time.